right, sir. As a general proposition, would you agree that the absence of bloodstains on a defendant or his clothing, which are frequently assumed to be definitive evidence that the defendant did not directly participate in the violent act, is a common misconception that is fostered and exploited by those who have insufficient knowledge and experience in bloodstain pattern interpretation, or by those who hope to help in their client's defense? Would you
Yes.
agree with that, sir?
Yes, I would.
Oh,
And that is the subject matter of this article, is it not?
Basically, it's a law school theme. It's not original with us. We just applied it to more specific applications in bloodstain pattern interpretation. It's a general rule, yes.
And as a matter of fact, the absence of blood, even in a very bloody crime scene, the absence of blood on a defendant or his clothing is not an unusual thing in your experience, is it, sir?
Objection on the scope.
sustain.
With regard to the amount of blood you expect to see on a defendant or his clothing after having committed a very bloody crime, a stabbing such as this one, if you were to fail to see a great volume of blood on that person, would that be surprising to you, sir?
Objection beyond the scope.
Sustain.
The view that blood, the absence of blood on a defendant who has participated in a bloody crime is not unusual. Is that one widely held in the forensic community?
Objection beyond the scope, and I would ask the
Sustain. Sustain.
Sir, you found, you examined these two socks, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you found the one stain which you quantified as being one drop, is that right?
Yes.
In the context of your examination, sir, and based on your experience and your expertise, is it unusual to find such a small amount of blood on the clothing of a defendant who has just involved himself in a very violent act, as you found in this case?
Objection again, Your Honor, assuming facts, time, and evidence. No
Sustain.
testimony.
Rephrase the question.
You examined both socks, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you observed blood, is that correct?
I observed what was tested to be blood. I didn't actually do the testing, but I observed some of it being tested with presumptive tests.
Okay. Other than, with respect to the blood stains that you found on the socks, sir, you found the one stain at the bony ankle area that protruded, correct?
Again, I did not determine they were blood. If they were blood stains, the stains I found were on more or less the bony protrudences, yes, the ankle bone.
All right. Now, the cutout area, the actual stain itself was cut out of the sock when you saw it, correct?
The center was cut out, yes.
And did you examine that center at any point?
The cutout wasn't with the sock. I never saw it, no.
Yeah. So all you ever saw was the periphery, correct?
The periphery and the cutout area.
The periphery of the cutout area, sir? Is that what you're
The
saying?
periphery of the stain within which the cutout area existed.
Okay. And then the area that was actually removed from the sock, that cutout, you did not see.
No, I did not.
So you did not see the center of the stain, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, with respect to the amount of blood on those socks, did you characterize, or what might be blood, okay, the amount of staining that you observed, did you characterize that as heavy staining, sir?
In the area as you came closer to the cutout area, it became more concentrated. I would not say it was terribly heavy, but it certainly was saturated in some areas. But the overall size of the stain would not tell me it's a heavy staining. It's about what one drop would do. The center would be wet through, and as you go out to the edges or the periphery, it becomes less and less to the point where it's just on the surface, the outside surface of the fibers.
Now, have you seen photographs of the crime scene in this case, sir?
Some of them.
Okay. It was a very bloody crime scene, was it not?
Objection on beyond the scope.
I've seen photographs of the crime scene, yes.
And would you agree with me, sir, that it was a very bloody crime scene?
It was an extremely bloody crime scene. I've seen several that were bloodier, so to speak, but there was a great abundance of blood, yes.
Okay. In your experience, sir, this is you've seen other double homicides, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And so this is a double homicide. You've seen that before.
I have.
And you've seen, I'm sure, cases in which there were throat slashing with maybe some arterial splurt, have you not?
Yes, I have, many
fact-
times.
In fact, isn't that the subject of some of your discussions in your book?
Yes, that's one of the classic patterns. It's arterial gushing. There are 3 subdivisions, but that's a classic pattern.
So that would not be unusual as an aspect of this case, correct?
Objection beyond the scope of the
Sustained. Let's go back to this sock, please.
Yeah, I'm trying. What I'm,
I know what you're doing.
you know, okay.
Proceed.
In other words, the amount of blood that you see in this crime scene, you have seen before, not unusual.
That's correct.
And the aspects of this killing are not unusual in your experience. You've seen them before, correct?
That's
Objection
correct.
about the
All right,
aspects
now-
of this.
Overruled.
And you examined the socks, did you not, sir?
I did.
And you indicated before, when I just asked you a couple minutes ago, that the amount of staining on the socks was not terrific, although in one area it was more concentrated, correct?
That's correct.
Is the absence of a great large volume of blood on those socks a surprise to you, in your experience, sir, based on what you know about what you expect to see on a defendant who has committed a very bloody crime?
Objection again, assumes facts not in
Phrase
evidence.
the question, please.
Based on your expertise, sir, and your experience over the years, is the failure to find large glops of blood on those socks unusual in light of the fact that there was a great deal of blood at the crime scene?
Again, objection assumes facts not in evidence. There's no testimony. Sorry.
Overruled.
No, it's not surprising at all because there's one basic thing that I don't know, and I don't think anyone does, that if a person is wearing long pants, it would cover that area. If they're wearing shorts, it wouldn't. That would be one thing that could intercept blood if it were indeed projected toward the socks. If I stand up, my pants will cover my socks, but not while sitting down. So that's just one factor. There are many factors to consider. And the absence of a lot of blood staining doesn't surprise me, but the presence is what we examine. We speculate on what's not present.
And that is something that you have warned many others not to do, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
That you should interpret what is there and not speculate what is not there.
Correct.
And so the absence of blood on a defendant who's committed a very bloody crime is not a surprising thing to you in your experience.
Sustained. Talking about socks.
The absence of a great deal of blood on those socks is not a surprising thing to you given your experience and your knowledge in this field, correct, sir?
No, not surprising.
And there can be innumerable explanations for that, wouldn't you agree, sir?
Yes, there can be.
Now, in your exam, did you only examine the socks in this case, sir?
That is correct. There were, I think, shoes or boots, but the only thing that I particularly examined was the 2 black socks, or navy blue, I should correct that. I see it as black. My wife sees it as navy blue. I don't think there's a difference.
Okay. So that was really the limit of what you examined in this case.
Yes, as far as the physical evidence is concerned.
Sir, can you tell us what are medium velocity blood spots?
Well, I don't know. We talk about blood spatter that results from medium velocity impact. If you're referring to that, they are projections of blood that results from an impact that may be consistent with a beating, a stabbing, any kind of action of approximately 25 feet per second, which is a very arbitrary value.
And when you say stabbing, I assume you would also include in that a throat slashing.
No, that would not be the same as a stabbing. A stabbing is simply a beating with a sharp instrument. And the spatter that results is from the impact to the surface where blood has accumulated. A slitting of an artery would produce no medium velocity. It would produce arterial gushing. It might produce some cast-offs, but unless you did it very rapidly, you couldn't have medium velocity spatter from a slitting of a throat, for example.
From a slitting, but that assumes, of course, that the perpetrator is standing in front to get the gushing or the spatter onto them. If he's standing behind, that would not be the case.
Well, again, that's not spatter. That would be arterial gushing. And it's less likely you would get blood coming from a wound to the front of a person if you're standing behind them than if you're standing in front of them. I think that's basic logic.
Now, what kind of, what velocity of spatter would you expect to see on the perpetrator of a crime who stands behind his victim and slashes his throat?
Sustain. Sustain.
Do you recall, what would you qualify? You indicated that you saw some evidence of spatter on the socks, correct?
Objection, that was testimony.
Yes, it was. I have the transcript.
Phrase the question, please.
You testified on direct that you saw some evidence of spatter on the socks. Do you recall that testimony, sir?
I don't believe I said I saw spatter. I saw what had been described as spatter. If I said I saw spatter, I did not see what I would call blood spatter.
Yes.
I'm going to show the answer to counsel, and then I'm going to read it to you, sir, and see if that refreshes your memory. Sir, I'm going to direct your attention to this area right here and ask you to read it, and ask you if it does not indicate that you said that you had seen other more convincing evidence of it, referring to spatter.
I can't listen and read at the same time. Yes, I've seen more convincing evidence of spatter in my career, but not on the socks.
I think that you ought to continue reading, sir. Do you-
Again, I'm referring to blood spatter as it appears, not on the sock. I looked at the best photographs available to me were the infrared pictures. They are not small round circles of what could be blood or something else. I think that's slightly out of context, but I can see how you would interpret it to mean on the socks.
Well, let me read this entire thing to you, and you tell me how you interpret it, all right, sir?
Certainly.
You were asked by Mr. Neufeld in your opinion, Professor MacDonell, is the ankle stain that you saw a spatter stain? Your answer? Not based upon the examination that I made of the socks at that time. I did not find any distribution of blood that I could consider a spatter. I have seen other more convincing evidence of it. Mr. Neufeld, okay. Now, with respect to the ankle stain, I want you to focus on that. In your opinion, was the ankle stain a spatter stain? Spatter stain, excuse me. Oh, no, not the ankle stain. I thought you meant the entire stocking. Now,
Yes, and
can you
I'm-
explain to us, sir? Well, let me ask you this. Didn't you mean to convey by that that in examining the entire stocking, you had seen evidence of spatter. Isn't that what you meant to convey?
Not at all. I stated that I've seen more compelling evidence of spattering many times than anything on this stocking, particularly in his first part of his question relating to the small transfer stain. Then when he went to the other spots, I disagreed. That is not what I'm referring to. I've seen more on other objects than I have on that sock. So that is, the way you're reading it, it would sound like I'm referring to the socks, but the evidence I've seen does not show spatter on the socks.
Sir, excuse me, but isn't it what you said here? You didn't say that in response to Mr. Neufeld's question. You said,
Wait. Counsel, rephrase the question. That's argumentative.
what you said in response to Mr. Neufeld's question, sir, was, oh no, not the ankle stain. I thought you meant the entire stocking. Were you referring to a stocking in another case?
No, I'm referring to that stocking, and I have seen more compelling evidence of spatter than I have ever seen on that stocking. That's not spatter.
Did you see any evidence of spatter around the ankle stain to which you've testified?
No.
You saw none.
Nothing that I would say makes a pattern of spatter. You don't have one little spot or two making a pattern.
And yet, sir, you have testified to a few little microbes as a pattern, have you not?
No,
You have testified concerning your observations of one stain. Isn't that true?
that's correct.
And in your book and in your writings, you have previously said that one stain does not a pattern make. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
But in this case, you've testified to only one stain. Isn't that right?
I'm testifying about the mechanism and not a pattern. A pattern consists of more than one stain. A mechanism and how it got there is an entirely a different matter.
What is the other evidence of blood that you saw around the ankle stain to which you've testified?
What's the other evidence?
Yes, what other pattern did you see, or what other spots did you see around the ankle stain that caused you to make the statement that you did concerning the observation of the entire stocking?
That I didn't see any spatter on the entire sock as well. I've seen more compelling evidence of spatter. The person who looked at that and thought they were round spots is mistaken. They're not spatter. They
What
look
is
like
it?
flying saucers and donuts and trapezoids. They're
What is
not
it?
round.
What is it?
Your Honor, objection, please allow the witness
Yes.
to finish her 9.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Well,
Then
that-
what is it?
I don't know. It looks like it was transferred in an irregular fashion. I don't know the mechanism.
You're testifying now to the finer spots around the ankle stain?
No, I'm testifying to the overall socks.
Sir, I'd like you to talk about the spots that are around the ankle stain to which you've testified. Can you do that for us, please?
Yeah?
Okay, can you tell us what your observations were with respect to the areas around that ankle stain?
I don't recall exactly. There might have been other spots there, but the stains immediately around it that were disassociated are on the surface of the fibers. They're the transfer stains.
You indicated, sir, that you saw the infrared videotape of those socks, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And would it refresh your memory a little bit if we showed you that infrared videotape?
Yes, I think photographs would be better because they're static, but I'd be happy to look at it again.
Thank you, we'll get those. Now, you indicated in your book that medium,
I'm sorry, I would ask that the attorney state which book, because there were several.
Which edition? Third edition? Just show Mr. Neufeld the page you're referring to. And which page, counsel?
62.
62. All right. All right, proceed.
All right, in your book, sir, you talk about the fact that stabbing or cutting will generally result in medium velocity blood stains, correct?
Yes, if there's sufficient impact.
And then you indicated in your book that medium velocity blood spatter is difficult to see. In fact, you said in your book that when such medium velocity blood spots as are generated in a stabbing are discovered on the clothes of the killer, they will usually be somewhat below the resolution of the average juror's eyesight. Can you look at page 62 and tell us if that is written in your book?
Yes,
And then that difficulty is enhanced or made more difficult when the material is dark in color. Isn't that true, sir?
that's correct.
And in fact, you had difficulty in the visualization of blood spatter on dark clothing in the Briggs case, in which you testified in Monterey County.
Wait. Let me see counsel at the sidebar. No, not at this point. I understand he has it. I haven't heard a basis for its admissibility yet. Proceed. The issue is the ability to see blood staining, medium velocity blood spatter on dark clothing. That's the issue. Proceed.
All right, and you would agree, sir, that blood, especially of the medium velocity range, would be difficult to visualize on dark fabric. Isn't that correct?
Generally, yes.
And what is the size of an average blood drop, sir?
50 microliters is the volume. If you want the diameter, it's 4.6 millimeters in air.
In air.
Yeah.
And on impact?
6.4 millimeters diameter. If it's very carefully laid down, in all practical purposes, if it falls perhaps 6 or 8 inches, it will be up to 11 or 12 millimeters.
Okay. And what was the size of the stain that you measured on the ankle bone of the sock, the ankle bone area of the sock?
There was no specific drop or circle. It was smeared in a sense. That's why it was not uniform in its density. The overall size was about 1 by 1.5 inches.
And you estimated then that the amount of blood in that stain would have been how much?
About 1 drop, possibly a little more.
50 microliters?
50 microliters, 60 microliters. It's very difficult to tell because the surface itself is plastic, that is, it's synthetic. And so it smears more easily than, say, cotton or something that would absorb more readily or thicker.
Did you take the material of these socks and attempt to measure the absorption rate on these socks?
No.
Did you make a cutting from the material of these socks and attempt to evaluate how much blood would actually be absorbed in the area of the size of the stain to which you've testified you think this one was?
It wouldn't have mattered if I had it. No, I didn't cut one out, but there's no way I could design such an experiment.
But your answer is no, you didn't.
No.
And did you perform any experiment on the actual socks themselves by cutting out a swatch to determine how absorbent it would be of water, how quickly it would absorb water?
No.
Did you cut out a piece of this material from these particular socks and imbue them with blood to determine how readily they would absorb blood?
No, I did not.
Wouldn't you agree, Mr. MacDonell, that it would be of some assistance to you in your testimony to have known how readily this particular sock would have absorbed blood or water?
If it was possible to determine it, I would be able to give a more accurate estimate, but I cannot think of how to design an experiment to do that if it comes from something other than a medicine dropper or a pipette. In other words, from a fingertip. I don't know how to measure the volume on the fingertip before I touch something and then measure the volume that remains, the difference being what's transferred.
Well, let me ask you this, sir. You examined the sock, and you saw only the periphery that had not been cut out, correct?
That's correct.
And you never examined the piece of fabric that was the center of the stain, correct?
That's correct.
Wouldn't it have been of some assistance to you, sir, to look at the inside, the center of that stain, in making your estimate of how much blood was actually in it?
I don't believe so, no. The stain was as saturated as I believe it could be right up to the outside of the cutout portion. If you're going to suggest the center was in some way void, then that would have been interesting. But I think they cut it out because it was the heaviest stain to do their testing on.
You think, but you don't know.
Well, it'd be pretty stupid if they took a void.
You didn't look at the actual stain itself, did you, sir?
Of course not.
And so what you're telling us, when you're telling us what your estimate is of the amount, is your best guess. Isn't that right?
It's an educated guess based upon experience, yes. It's a
Nonetheless.
guess. It's an approximation,
A guess.
estimate.
You did not quantify the blood in that stain, correct?
Yes, I estimated it to be about 1 drop, possibly a little more.
What test did you do, sir, on the inside center portion which you never saw? What test did you perform on that center portion which you never saw to determine precisely how much blood there was in it?
I assume that physics works in California and
Objection,
capillary
Your Honor,
action.
this is non-responsive.
I'm
The
gonna
question was,
No, the question, I'm going to sustain the court's own objection to that question. Rephrase the question or move on.
did you conduct any experiment to quantify the exact amount of blood on the cutout portion of the stain?
No.
did you conduct any experiment to quantify the amount of blood in the periphery of the stain that remained on the sock?
No tests, no.
Now, you examined those socks for the first time on April 2nd, 1995, is that right?
That's correct.
And present with you at the time of that examination were Mark Taylor and Henry Lee, both experts for the defense, correct?
Yes, and there were other people present, of course.
During your examination?
Yes.
And who was that?
Peter Neufeld, and I think it's Greg Matheson. He had custody of the evidence.
Greg Matheson had custody of the evidence. He brought it to you, is that correct?
I believe he was there all the time we examined the sock. He stepped out, I believe, at a point when we had shoes out or something like that. He wasn't there all the time.
Isn't it true, sir, that you requested that he leave while your examinations were being conducted?
No, that isn't true.
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
No, that is not true.
You did not permit him to remain in the room the entire time you were performing your experiments and your investigation. Isn't that correct?
Objection to compound question.
Overruled.
No, ma'am, that is not correct. I was not giving orders or requests to anyone. I was there to make examinations. What went on between other people, why they came in, why they left, was of no concern to me. I did not direct such things, no.
Someone in the room did ask him to leave at some point, did they not, sir, in your presence?
I don't remember it. I know he left. I don't know if he was asked to leave or he had to go to the bathroom, but he wasn't there all the time.
And he left for a substantial period of time, did he not, sir?
Objection vague and substantial.
Sustained.
All right. He was gone for over an hour, was he not?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
I don't believe he was going anywhere near that long, but to be honest, I was paying no attention. I was examining things, and whether he was there every minute or not, I don't know. I do recall he left for a period. I don't know how long it was.
Let's move on.
Then it's your testimony that you do not recall anyone asking him to leave the room. Is that the way you remember it, sir?
That's the way I remember it.
Overruled.
All right. Now, with respect to those socks which you saw for the first time on April 2nd, 1995, sir, would you please tell us your understanding of the history of those socks from their date of collection on June the 13th, 1994?
My understanding is that they were kept in custody. They were tagged in and out. I really didn't inquire as to the history.
Sir, wouldn't you agree that it would be extremely important to know as much as possible about the life history of those socks and how they were handled before you saw them?
Objection as to what purpose?
Sustained. Question's vague. Phrase the question.
For the purpose of determining or assessing that what you saw was the condition of the socks at the time that they were collected on June the 13th, or at the time the blood was first detected at some point thereafter. Wouldn't it be important to you to know what those socks had been subjected to between the time of their collection on June the 13th and some 10 months later when you finally saw them on April 2nd, 1995? Wouldn't
Objection
that be important to know, sir?
sorry. Objection as to the word condition is too vague.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Sir, with respect to whether or not those little balls, those little microbes, were on the opposite inside surface of the sock, which you observed.
Sustained. Sustained. Counselors, not microbes.
What did he say?
You
He didn't
said
say that?
microbe. You've used the term 3 times now, microbes.
Those little balls that you testified to, sir, on the opposite inside surface of the sock, wouldn't it be important to you to observe the condition, to observe whether or not they were present when the sock was collected on June the 13th or at the time the blood was detected thereafter, to know whether or not that condition existed at that time as opposed to when you finally saw them 10 months later, April 2nd, 1995? Wouldn't it be important to you to know what had happened to them in between those two times?
It wouldn't be important to me. I examined them to see what was present. Unless there's some strange handling of the evidence or storage, that's something I would not know and would expect to be documented in some manner and be advised of. But that's more for the attorneys to establish Then when I'm asked to examine something, that's what I do. I don't know the history of it.
Oh, sir. Then it's your testimony that no, it would not be important for you to know all of the handling and what had happened to those socks from their time of collection till the time you examined them for the purpose of giving more meaning to your observation of those little balls.
I believe I answered that and said it could be important, but I do not know what it was.
You do not know the history.
That's correct.
Then you agree that it could be important for you to know that.
I just said that.
Then wouldn't you also agree, sir, that it would have been important for you to observe the condition of those socks, at least as of the date when the blood was first discovered?
If they were altered from the time they were discovered until I saw them, yes. If they were kept in pristine condition, no.
Sir, and that's my question. Wouldn't it be important to know whether they had been kept in pristine condition or tested, manipulated, twisted, and bounced around? Wouldn't it be important to know that if that occurred in between the date of collection or blood detection and your observation?
It might explain what I saw, but it wouldn't change what I saw.
I agree, sir, but it might help to explain what you saw, would it not?
I'm not explaining what I saw from the standpoint of the history. I'm explaining the appearance as I saw it.
And so you cannot tell this jury that those little balls that you saw on the opposite inside surface were there when the sock was collected on June the 13th, can you?
Sustained. Raise a question.
Sir, you cannot tell this jury how those little balls came, strike that. You cannot tell this jury, sir, when those little balls came to be on the opposite inside surface where you observed them on April 2nd, 1995. Isn't that true?
No, I can tell that.
You can tell them when?
Yes, it was before I examined them.
Yes. At any point before they examine them, though, you cannot be more specific than that. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And you cannot tell this jury that those little balls came to be on the opposite inside surface on June the 14th, June the 15th, August 10th, September 28th, or any other date, specifically before the date you examined them on April 2nd. Isn't that right?
Objection, facts not in evidence, there's no good faith basis for the question.
You can answer.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. No, I have no idea when they occurred. They occurred prior to my examination.
Make any effort to inquire of Greg Matheson as to the history of the socks when he was present with you on April 2nd, 1995?
No, I did not.
Oh, Your Honor? Now, let me ask you something. Are you aware that phenolphthalein tests were conducted on this sock on August the 4th, 1994?
I may have read that. I don't recall that date specifically. I know phenolphthalein tests were performed.
All right. And there are two types of phenolphthalein tests, correct? Well, maybe more, but
Well,
at least two.
Phenolphthalein is reduced to phenolphthalein. When it reacts with peroxidases, it converts back to phenolphthalein. It seems few people can spell the word correctly, but there's a test with phenolphthalein.
Oh.
Very sensitive for peroxidases in blood.
And,
You asked the question.
well, I'd like I should have called him way back when. Anyway, Mr. MacDonell, let me ask you, are you aware that there are some phenolphthalein tests that are wet in nature, that require the use of diluted water? Excuse me,
No,
not diluted water, distilled water.
diluted water. I've seen it written both ways, but I think most of the tests that I read about recently are orthotolidine, not phenolphthalein. Orthotolidine, I believe, is what was used when I was there.
Okay. Which is a dry method, is that correct?
Well, the material that you're testing is dry, and you use a moistening agent, a piece of damp filter paper or something, to remove from the surface some of this material you're testing. And then you use wet reagents. So it's dry then wet.
Are you aware of the kind of phenolphthalein test conducted on August 4th, 1994?
Excuse me, Your Honor, objection to this to the sidebar. I believe there's no evidence of this at this point.
All right, I think we'll take our break with the jury at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our mid-afternoon break at this time. Remember all my admonitions to you, and I'll ask you just to step back into the jury room, and we'll get back to you in probably about 20 minutes this time. Going with this?
I want to show them the photograph.
No, where are you going with this? What's the point of discussing phenolphthalein or phenolphthalein testing with this witness? All right, Mr. MacDonell, why don't you step out of the courtroom, please? Where are we going with this?
The point is the alteration to the socks, Your Honor. There's been a lot that's been done to these socks. This is one of the things, and they used water on the stain, and the water is observable in the photograph.
The water is observable in the photographs that were taken by the defense.
No, by the people. The stain was rehydrated, is what I'm saying. This was a stain in which there's confirmed testing, so we're not running up against the court's ruling concerning phenolphthalein, if that's the counsel's concern.
No, I was wondering, no, I wanted to know where we're going with this, is what I wanted to know. All right, Mr. Neufeld?
That's where we're going.
Are you saying that the inner surface of the opposite side of the sock was tested after a section was cut out with the wet phenolphthalein test? I'm just trying to seek some clarification here. Or are we simply talking about that the stain on the outside of the sock where the stain was originally found, if you will, had a phenolphthalein test?
First time I've heard of rehydrating a blood stain.
See?
I'm sorry.
But what was the purpose for rehydrating a blood stain?
No, they didn't rehydrate purposefully. It was in the course of the test, using the distilled water. The stain was rehydrated in the
Okay.
process of trying to test it. This is August 4th. They're testing the outside of the sock.
Was this before the cutout was made?
Yeah.
And so it's not on the other side of the sock.
No.
But I think her point is going to be if it's lying flat, that could explain how the substance is on the inside of the opposite side.
Well, this is one of many possibilities. This is one. I mean, there's been a lot done to this sock that he doesn't know about. And it's important, as he acknowledged, that all the history of the sock and what was
Alright.
done to it is important.
Okay, now you know.
Okay.
All right, we'll take 15. Doesn't matter, all parties are again present. Deputy MacDonell, let's have the jurors, please. We're going to go to 4 o'clock. And I hope we will conclude before that.
Your Honor.
All right. Important things to do next week. Mr. MacDonald has important things to do next week. Well, by Friday. No, I'm saying we'll finish today. Yeah. Please be seated. Mr. MacDonell, would you resume the witness stand, please? And Ms. Clark, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, when we left off, sir, we were discussing the fact that you were not aware of the history of the sock before you saw it on April 2nd, 1995. Do you recall that?
Objection, I didn't say the history.
Overruled.
No, I do not know the history prior to that, how it was stored and maintained, no.
And you made no effort to determine what the history of the sock was with respect to how it had been handled before you saw it on April 2nd of 1995.
All right, we've established that already. Let's proceed.
I think I only asked about Greg Matheson. I would like.
Let's proceed.
Well, can you tell us, sir, what effort you made to determine what the history of the handling and testing of that sock was before you saw it on April 2nd, 1995?
I did not make any determination of the history. My purpose there was to examine it as it was, in the condition received.
In that case, sir, then you cannot tell us whether the condition you observed on April 2nd was there before August 4th, 1994.
No, of course not.
Ms. Clark.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd ask that this photograph be marked People's next in order, People's
553.
553.
Appears to be a photograph of a sock with a Q-tip.
You recognize what's being done in this photograph, sir?
Yes, I do.
That's a phenolphthalein test, isn't it?
Well, it's the sampling prior to the phenolphthalein test.
Yes, and the phenolphthalein test is a presumptive test for blood, is it not?
That's correct.
Now, if you would focus in, Jonathan, on that thing. Do you see that spot there, sir?
Well, I did.
Used to. You see it?
I see, yeah, there it comes. I see
There
a
we go.
spot, yes.
All right. Does that appear to be water, sir?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Sustained.
Does it look wet?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Sustained.
Appear wet?
Yes.
What does that look like to you?
Looks like a yellowy lips.
And does it look like it might be liquid?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Is there a form of phenolphthalein test that uses distilled water, sir?
Yes, certainly. You have to have a solvent, either saline or distilled water.
And if that is the test does that appear to be the test being performed here, sir?
Objection, Your Honor. That's what appears.
Overruled.
As stated before, it appears to me to be the sampling phase. First you sample the material and then you analyze it by adding the reagent to it. This would be just sampling, removing a suspect stain or a portion thereof for testing.
Okay, and you remove the suspect stain or a portion thereof by using a damp Q-tip to sample the area, is that correct?
That's correct. A damp Q-tip or whatever, filter paper you can be used also.
Okay. In this case, they used what appears to be a damp Q-tip. Would you agree, sir?
I would agree it's a Q-tip and it apparently has been damped. It should be if it's going to be used.
Now, are you aware that of the date on which this photograph was taken?
No.
Now, sir, would it be important to you to know whether, as of the date, after the date of this photograph, assume for the hypothetical that it's August 4th, 1994,
Objection, no evidence as to when this
Overruled.
particular picture was made.
Overruled.
that the socks were frozen and unfrozen, twisted, cut,
Objection as to twisted.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Objection as to cut.
Overruled.
At this point,
Overruled.
would you agree, sir, that it would be important to know that after the point of the testing shown in this photograph, the socks had been frozen and unfrozen repeatedly? Would that be good for you to know?
Well, again, this is not testing in the photograph. The test followed the photograph. It would not be important for me to know because I saw what I saw at the time I examined it. If you want me to speculate as to what could have caused it, then if I knew certain factors, I might be in a position to speculate.
Then you would agree, sir, that your lack of knowledge as to whether or not the socks have been frozen and unfrozen repeatedly would have an impact on your ability to give us some opinion as to how the little balls that you saw got to be on the inner side of the sock that you saw on April 2nd, correct?
Objection.
Objections to formal question.
Oral.
Freezing and thawing, I do not conceive as a mechanism that would allow the things that I observed in the cutout portion on the opposite side to have been formed. I can't imagine a mechanism by simply freezing and thawing unless you purposely put it in a high humidity cabinet that could cause that. I just don't see that that's a factor.
So it's your opinion then, sir, that even though you're not aware of how many times it was frozen and unfrozen, you're willing to give the opinion to this jury that that would have no impact on whether or not those little balls would appear on the other side of the sock. Is that correct?
Oral.
The statement I made did not say have no effect. I said that might explain an effect, but I cannot imagine how simply freezing and thawing, or the number of times it's done, would have any significant effect upon creating what I observed when I looked at them on April 2nd.
But you don't know, do you, sir?
Of course not.
And you cannot tell this jury whether or not that's how those little balls came to be on the other side of the stain. Isn't that right, sir?
Objection. Asked to answer twice.
Overruled.
I don't know what you mean by that. You'll have to explain. Is that supposed to mean a mechanism? Could you rephrase that, please?
You cannot tell us, sir, whether or not, you cannot state to this jury that the freezing and unfreezing process absolutely did not cause the appearance of those little balls on the inside of the sock that you saw on April 2nd, 1995. Isn't that true?
Objection. Asked to answer twice.
Overruled.
No scientist can state absolutes. Of course not.
And you did not inquire, you examined these socks with Dr. Lee on April 2nd, isn't that right?
That is correct.
Did you discuss with him his examination of the socks on February 16th, 1995?
No.
Were you aware of his examination of the socks that he had conducted on February 16th, 1995?
To the extent that he just observed them, I do not believe he made a microscopic examination at that time. That is my best recollection.
But you do not know.
I don't recall further, so I don't know.
And you do not know whether he, in the process of his examination on February 16th, 1995, twisted and pulled the socks in an effort to get a better look at any side of it or any aspect of it, do you?
Objection. Assuming facts
Sustained.
not evidence.
Sustained.
Are you aware, sir, of the fact that LAPD set up a microscope for Dr. Lee to use in his February 16th examination?
No, I was not aware of that.
And in the course of a microscopic examination, sir, in your experience, can it occur that material or fabric will be pulled or twisted in an effort to get a certain area under the field of view?
Certainly.
And would it be important to know whether that had occurred on multiple occasions with this particular sock?
It could be, but I can't imagine exactly how.
But it could add important information, sir, with respect to determining how those little microbes got onto the side of the sock where you observed them in 1995.
Sustained. Sustained. Raise the question.
I'm sorry. Little balls.
They're not microbes. Microbes are alive. Now I forgot the question.
Could it be important information whether or not the sock was repeatedly manipulated and twisted during repeated microscopic examinations to determine how those little balls got onto the side of the sock when you observed them on April 2nd, 1995?
I can't imagine how I really don't see how manipulating the fabric could create dried balls of red fluid inside of a sock. It may be possible, but I have no idea what the mechanism would be that could cause those to form simply by manipulation. They were dried and they were wet and they dried.
Let me ask you something, sir. You said you observed one of those little balls to be adherent to the fiber, is that correct?
Objection, that's not his testimony.
I observed several, I think half a dozen at least. We photographed the one that showed the bonding to the fiber the most distinctly.
Okay. Is it, sir, based on your examination, one was bonded well enough to photograph, is that correct?
Objection, that's not his testimony.
I think they were all bonded, but this one showed the bonding to a fiber that was also part of the woven thread. That's the reason it was selected.
And that's the reason you took only one photograph, although you saw 6 or 7 of those little balls. Is that right?
Now, I didn't take the photographs. Dr. Lee actually clicked them off. I observed them.
You observed them, but there was only one photograph taken. Is that right, sir?
It's the only one that I have seen. I think it's the best representation, and I'm sure that's why he enlarged it.
Is your answer yes?
What was the question? Did I observe just one?
No, no. Mr. MacDonell, please listen to the question. I asked you whether you took there was only one photograph taken of those little balls that you saw on the inner surface of the sock.
I answered that when I said Dr. Lee took it. I did not take any,
The question is only one photograph, correct?
to the best of my knowledge.
And that one photograph was taken because, in your opinion, or in your collective opinion, that demonstrated most clearly the bonding of that little ball. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, let me ask you something. With respect to that little ball that you saw bonded, what test did you perform to determine whether it was in fact adherent to the fabric or simply lying in the weave where you saw it?
It seems to surround the fiber or the thread-like material to which it is bonded, and it didn't move, so it didn't fall off. We're dealing with something extremely small. We didn't do any testing. To try to abrade it would perhaps fracture it, but it's exceedingly small. We did no actual testing except observation.
All right. As a matter of fact, those little balls that you saw, you said 6 or 7 of them?
Yes.
Did you make any effort to quantify those little balls?
As to volume?
Yes, as to volume, sir.
No.
If you took those 6 or 7 little balls and put them all in a purple top tube and stacked them on top of each other, could you see them?
Not without a microscope, or unless you're extremely myopic.
And yet the stain on the outside of the opposite side of the sock, you said was 50 microliters, 60 maybe?
Yes.
And all you had was those 6 or 7 little balls that you couldn't even see if stacked up together with the naked eye. Is that right?
Or grouped, yes.
Now, with respect to the manipulation of the sock, sir, you indicated that strike that. These socks, they were stretchy, elastic in nature, were they not?
Yes.
Blood, when it dries, is not elastic, is it, sir?
No.
Now, if you were to have blood dried on a sock, and then you were to stretch it, blood might flake off, if even in only microscopic amounts. Would that be true, sir?
Yes, it is.
And if the sock is stretched in some fashion, which causes the blood to flake, and then the sock is compressed through storage in a bag, there will be some microscopic or some flaking happening of the blood that has dried on the sock. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. There should be.
And if, in fact, the blood that has hit the outer surface of the sock has seeped through to the inside, if it rubs against the other side in a dried condition, causing by friction, there will be some flaking as well, will there not, even if only microscopic in amount?
Well, it's even simpler than that. It wouldn't have to flake off and go through the sock, because when it dries, it's through the sock to begin with. So it could flake off from the inside of the outside surface at that point. And then if it landed on the inside, you would have some flakes on the side opposite the inside. Yes, that could happen.
And you indicated that you were not present when Dr. Lee did his examination of the socks on February 16th, 1995. Is that right, sir?
That is correct.
Now, on the date that you did the examination with him, did you turn the socks inside out?
I think we did after the initial photographs were taken.
And when you say the initial photographs were taken, are you talking about the photographs of the little balls?
Yes, I believe we took all the photographs before we did any what you could call stretching or manipulation of the socks. We left them quite flat as we took them out.
Do you know whether anyone turned those socks inside out or twisted them in any fashion before you made that examination on April 2nd, 1995?
No, I don't.
Would that be information that you would like to have, sir, informing your opinion as to how those little balls got onto that side of the sock?
No.
You don't think that would be important to know?
No, not unless you added many factors, such as if the socks were wet and you turned them inside out. That might make a difference, but you're exposing the inside where I detected these small balls of red material to the outside at that point, so you're defeating the purpose of transfer. That would no longer be in contact with the area that was stained, so you're losing ground that way if you're trying to transfer them.
No, let me ask you this, sir. You don't know whether they were wet on some occasion after the blood was detected on August 4th with that Q-tip, correct?
No,
No foundation for that.
Sustained. Phrase the question.
Well, Your Honor, I have a series of 3 photographs I'd like to show to the witness. I'm going to show them to counsel. Be marked Peoples 554,
554.
555, and 556.
Yes, 554 is the first number.
All right, so I'm going to show you a photograph. You recognize the... Can you recognize the person in that photograph, sir?
Yes, I do.
Who's that?
That's Dr. Henry Chung Lee.
All right. Did you see him perform the manipulation with the sock that he is in this photograph in your presence on April 2nd?
No, I did not.
Did anyone... Were you ever...
I'm sorry, can we have a sidebar?
Let me see the photographs with clipboard, please.
All right. These photographs, we will stipulate, were taken on February 16th, 1995.
All right, is that agreeable to the defense?
Yes, on the date when Professor MacDonell wasn't there.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
So you did not see this manipulation by Dr. Lee, correct?
I wasn't there. No, I did not see them.
And he didn't do that kind of manipulation again in your presence on April 2nd, is that right?
If he did, I didn't see him do it. I don't believe he did.
showing you now people's 555. Again, you recognize Dr. Henry Lee?
Yes, I do.
This is his manipulation of the sock on February 16th, 1995 again.
Now, that appears more of a manipulation than the first one. The first one, I'd say, just holding it up, not manipulating it. This one, it appears he is either turning it inside out or at least manipulating it in some fashion.
And is that something that you also did on April 2nd, 1995?
We turned them inside out, yes.
In the manner in which Dr. Lee is doing?
Well, in any manner you can to turn socks inside out, I don't think there's much choice. This looks about the only way to do it.
All right, now I'm showing you people's 556. Appear to be a photograph of Dr. Lee taking a picture through a microscope, sir?
Yes, he's taking a picture through a stereo binocular microscope using the right ocular.
And again, we stipulate this is February 16th, 1995. Is that right?
I don't know.
No, I'm asking counsel.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So it would appear that he did examine the socks under a microscope on that date, correct, sir?
Yes, a low-power stereo binocular. I think the maximum magnification is about 25 diameters with most stereo binocular microscopes.
Okay. Now, the microscope that you used on April the 2nd, 1995, had what power magnification?
It was 7 to 70.
You do not know, or do you know for a fact, have you ever seen this microscope up closer?
Not this particular one, no. I have one, but not exactly the same model.
So are you sure when you say that this the greatest magnification power on this microscope would be 25 times?
No, that's why I said they're usually 7 to 25.
Now, the photograph that you've shown us here of the little ball on the inside of the sock, that was taken on April 2nd when you were present, correct?
That's correct.
You don't know of any such photographs that were taken on February 16th by Dr. Lee, do you?
No,
No foundation for that question, I didn't even know that he was there.
Sustained.
Have you been shown any photographs taken by Dr. Lee on February 16th showing the little balls on the inside of the sock?
no, I have not.
And the photograph that you've produced here in court showing the little ball on the inside of the sock, the one that you have shown, is what magnification?
I would approximate the magnification of the actual print to well over 100 diameters, but I have not made that calculation. I do not know the diameter of the first picture that I saw, which is a 4 by 6, and if I don't know how big the magnification is on this, I could ordinarily make the correction, but without knowing a starting point, I can't proportion it up. I'm estimating from memory of what I saw that would be about 100 or more diameters. Dr. Lee could tell you exactly.
All right, Ms. Clark, our record is rather sloppy here. You're referring to photographs of red balls. Which exhibit are we talking about here?
And I can't remember their defense.
I think it's 1278. I think, I'm not certain.
1278?
Yes.
Because one is with
You're
just
referring it to a counsel, so you tell us which one you're talking about.
I'm going to...
That's 1278.
That one.
Is that large one, 1278, Mr. Gordon?
Yes, Jim.
1278.
Is that 1278? Okay, this is the one we're referring to, sir, is the one with the little ball in the blue circle?
Yes,
That's 1278.
correct.
Okay. You were not shown any such photographs that were taken by Dr. Lee on February 16th, 1995, correct?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, do any exist?
Sustained. He hasn't seen any.
All right, sir. Now, were you aware that on August 4th, the same day the socks were tested, given the presumptive test for blood, the first step of which you saw, the sampling of which you saw in the photograph, Susan Brockbank also examined those socks for hair and trace. Were you made aware of that?
I believe I read that, yes.
Okay. And that has no impact on your opinion as to how those little balls got there?
No, it does not.
And you were also made aware then that Greg Matheson performed serological testing for PGM subtyping on that sock after August the 4th. Were you made aware of that, sir?
Objection, it's misleading for your approach.
Overruled. Rephrase the question, though.
Greg Matheson performed PGM subtyping on that stained area of the sock after August 4th. Were you made aware of that?
Objection, because he cuts out a portion and removes it.
Yes. Rephrase the question.
Were you made aware of the fact, sir, that that to perform PGM subtyping testing, Greg Matheson cut a portion out of the sock in order to perform that testing,
Yes,
and that he had to handle the sock in the process of doing that?
obviously.
And that has no impact on your opinion as
No.
to how those little balls got there?
No, it doesn't.
Now, you prepared a report in this case, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And that report is dated July 11th, 1995?
I believe it is.
You've been working for the defense since August of 94, is that right?
Well, that's when they first contacted me. I actually didn't have anything to do until I had made a trip to Albany, I think in December.
And this report is the only one that you have prepared in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And it details only your observation of the one area of the sock where you saw those little balls, correct?
That's correct.
You examined both socks, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And there's nothing in your report about the other sock, is that right?
No, there isn't.
Or any of the other stains on the sock that you did observe?
That's correct.
So it's just your report is confined to the one stain that you've testified to here in court, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, if I understand your testimony correctly, sir, the inside of that stain, I'm going to try and number these surfaces, make it easier. The outside portion of the stain where the blood was first received is surface 1. Inside, surface 2. The inside of the opposite side, surface 3. Okay? It's your testimony, sir, that the transfer to surface 3 came from surface 2. Is that right?
Yes, if it's transferred from that surface, again, I did not determine what that material is. The only way it could have gotten there is for a liquid that is red to have gone from surface 2 to surface 3.
And now you've testified that you did not perform any test on the cutout area, on that cutout fabric from the center of the stain to quantify how much blood was in it.
That's correct.
Now, if the, as a matter of common sense, would it be fair to state, sir, that the more blood you have on the inner aspect of that stain, the more little balls you expect to find on the opposite side?
It's vague as to inner aspect.
Sustain. You just finished numbering the sides. Won't you?
All right. The more blood you, or the more liquid or blood that you have on the area of surface 2, the inside of the sock, the more little balls you're going to expect to see on surface 3. Is that right?
As you said, it would be more likely. It's common sense, certainly.
And of course, this assumes that the little balls on surface 3 can be attributed to the stain on surface 2, correct?
Absolutely.
And you have not said that you make that assumption, have you not, sir?
You cannot say that you haven't
No,
said
I-
it, have you not?
See?
All right.
Clear to me. You indicated that, I believe in your direct testimony, you made the statement that if the stain in surface 2 is related to the little balls on surface 3, that they would have gotten there when wet. Do you recall that?
Yes,
But you cannot say that the little balls on surface 3 are related to the stain on surface 2, can you, sir?
No, I can't.
Now, it would be true, would it not, that the more blood you have on surface 2, the more little balls you expect to find on surface 3,
Only if the little balls are blood.
if they are.
Yes, certainly.
And you found only 6 or 7, is that right?
That's the number of what I would call balls, which looked like a wet material that dried, adhering to fibers, yes. I saw other red spots.
Let's just talk about those little balls for a second. You only brought in a photograph of one of them, correct?
I think we've asked this question now 3 times, Counsel.
Why weren't all of them photographed, sir?
I have no idea. We photographed the most representative. Dr. Lee, again, took the pictures, and that's a question you'd have to direct to him. I observed them.
Now, you made no attempt to quantify the volume of those 6 or 7 little balls, did you?
We've asked that question.
Okay. You indicated that there were also other little flakes.
There are many red spots that show up in the photograph that has been introduced that are clearly little red areas. And if the microscope was adjusted in its depth of field, in other words, focused, you would lose the one that we have photographed, and then you would see others. So they're clearly evident. There are red areas in there, and those are the areas to which I made reference.
But they are not photographed, are they, sir?
Yes, but they're out of focus.
So you can't see them in the photograph that you took.
You can see them, but you can't resolve them.
So did you make any attempt to have a photograph taken that would resolve them so the jury could see them?
Sustain, rephrase the question.
Did you make any effort to take a photograph that would have them, those flakes that you saw, in good resolution?
Oral.
The photograph that's introduced shows the best representation of the drying of a red fluid. Other red spots could be flakes, as you just stated. They could have been other of the red balls we saw. I cannot tell because they're so far out of focus. They are not resolved.
Though these little balls are a very important aspect of your testimony, are they not, sir?
Sustain.
All right, sir, in your terminology, a swipe is different than a compression, is that right?
To the extent that one involves lateral motion, the other involves compression, they are both transfer mechanisms.
They are both methods of transfer, is that what you said?
You know, I said they're both transfer mechanisms.
Nevertheless, are they separate and distinct mechanisms of transfer?
Yes, as opposed to other means of staining, such as dripping and projection.
Well, you took great pains to explain to this jury, did you not, that this was a compression and not a swipe. Is that right?
Sustain, rephrase the question.
You went into some length in your testimony, sir, to describe for this jury how this was a compression and not a swipe.
Objection argumentative.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
Sir, were you attempting to explain to this jury the difference between a swipe and a compression with regard to your observation of the stain on this sock?
Well, I thought I did it. I didn't attempt. I thought I explained it clearly enough, the difference. Yes.
And why did you want to explain to them the difference between a swipe and a compression?
So they would know they're both surface. I think I was asked if it was a swipe initially, or that came up, so I differentiated between the two. I said I looked to see if there were any trailings or featherings to see if it was a swipe. The difference between the two is really not significant. It's just a matter of my classification.
If it's not significant, sir, then why did you draw a distinction before the jury?
Because there is a distinction.
Then some transfers are swipe and others are a compression. Is that right, sir?
That is correct.
And they are distinct in your opinion.
They're different. One involves lateral motion, the other does not. That's the extent of the difference.
Okay. So a swipe could occur if I moved my ankle across a wet surface. Is that right?
Sustain.
A swipe could occur if I move my ankle against a wet wound.
Certainly.
Now, your report, sir, is an accurate summary of your findings with respect to the sock A, is it not?
I believe so, yes.
And you took pains to make sure that it accurately reflected your findings in this case, did you not?
I prepared it as accurately as I could at the time. I have no reason to suspect there's any error.
And you signed the report, did you not?
Yes,
And you reviewed the report before signing it, I take it?
I usually do.
And you examined that report before you testified, did you not?
Not recently. I did it, I think, 2 trips ago.
You prepared that report, sir, based on your observations of April the 2nd, 1995, is that right?
That's correct.
And in that report, you documented what your observations were.
To some extent, yes.
But it was an accurate summary, was it not?
I believe it to be.
Do you have a copy of your report here, sir?
Yes, I do.
Would you mind getting it out, please? Thank you. Sir, let me direct your attention to paragraph 4. Did you not write in this report, sir, when this sock is laid flat, the stain described in point 2 is directly below the stained area described in point 1. The only reasonable conclusion, therefore, is that the fluid that caused these stains was swiped against the outside of the left side of the sock. That is what you wrote in your report, is it not?
That's correct.
And you considered that to be an accurate depiction of what you observed on April the 2nd, 1995. Is that correct?
That's what I wrote, yes.
That's what you wrote. And yet you testified to the fact that you now believe that to be a compression and not a swipe. Wasn't that your testimony, sir?
That was my testimony.
Now, sir, wouldn't you agree that with respect to the differentiation that you have made, the distinctions that you have indicated you made between swipe and compression, that was an important distinction, was it not?
It's not important at all, as I said. Swiping shows there is a lateral component to a compression. They're both transfer mechanisms. Compression occurs in swiping. And I wrote swiping here. It would not matter whether it said compression or swiping. This pushing of blood or any fluid into a fabric is a compression.
And yet,
Swiping merely means there's lateral movement accompanying it. When I looked at it here, it appeared to be swiping. I have since seen enlarged photographs that we took that show that the swiping appearance, which is on the surface of the fibers, seems to be fairly uniform on both sides. So now I would say it's more likely a compression only. Both are compression. One has lateral movement. I describe lateral movement as well.
all right, did you take any notes at the time that you made your observations of this sock to document what you saw?
Yes, very, very few. Dr. Lee was described.
Did you personally took notes, sir?
Yes, very.
Did you turn them over to the defense?
Yes.
They've been turned over to the prosecution, Your Honor.
No, they have not.
All right, we'll take this up later. Proceed.
May I see those notes, sir? Thank you.
Welcome.
Tell me where in those notes, sir, you indicate that there was no lateral movement in the stain that you characterized in your report as a swipe.
I don't characterize it either way.
And tell me where in your report you demonstrate or you document your observation that there was no lateral movement.
I don't believe I did.
And tell us where in your report you document the observation of voids that you've testified to here in court.
I don't believe I did that either.
Now, the lack of lateral movement and the appearance of voids were the indicia that you testified to as evidence that this was a compression and not a swipe. Isn't that your testimony?
That's correct. And when I indicate voids for descriptive purposes, that's one thing, but I don't have to indicate them to know what I'm seeing. So I know what the meaning of the term is. And that's why I wouldn't bother to put there are voids here, there are voids there. That is part of seeing a compression transfer or a lateral transfer.
But you did not put down compression transfer in your report, did you, sir?
No, it was written for attorneys, not scientists.
Sir, you are aware of the fact that counsel has retained you as an expert, isn't that right?
I hope so.
And you are aware of the fact that the report that you give to them is turned over to the people as well before you testify.
Certainly it is.
You filed no addendum to your report to reflect the change from swipe to compression, did you?
There's no change. They're both transfers.
They are both transfers, but you made a distinction. You made a point of telling us it was a compression and not a swipe. Isn't that right?
That is the way it appeared at the examination. The photographs I examined later showed it to be more uniform, and therefore I concluded it was more likely simply a compression. It could still be a swipe.
And you filed no addendum to indicate to the people that you were going to change from the swipe that you indicated in your report to a compression that you testified to here in court. Isn't that right?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
What effort did you make, sir, to inform the people of the fact that you weren't sure if it was a swipe or a compression, but you were leaning towards compression?
Objection irrelevant as to what's notified to people.
Sustained.
Sir, knowing that your report said a swipe and said nothing about a compression, wouldn't you agree it was very misleading not to make an effort to inform?
Sustained. Argumentative counsel.
You did not write any new report to indicate that you were uncertain as to whether it was a swipe or that you had changed your mind, to say now that it was a compression.
From July 11th, I haven't had time to read my initial report. I've been traveling. I have not made any addendum, no. There's no correction to be made.
No correction to be made because it could still be a swipe. Is that your testimony?
It's a matter of interpretation. If you agree that the fine blood on the surface of the fibers is uniform on each side of that elliptical stain, then it's more like the compression. It's a compression mechanism if it's a swipe. It could be that the leading edge and the trailing edge are basically the same geometry. It's a distinction that is really, in my mind, totally irrelevant.
So to you, it makes no difference whether you call it a swipe or a compression. Is that your testimony, sir?
A swipe is a compression with lateral motion.
Do you recall how many times in your testimony on direct examination you said that this was a compression and not a swipe?
I may have said it several times. I have no idea how many.
And if that is the case, sir, that you said it several times, what would be the point of that if it were unimportant to distinguish between the two?
Sustained.
If it makes no difference, sir, then why testify before this jury repeatedly that it was a compression and not a swipe, if it doesn't matter?
Overruled.
So they would be reminded and understand it.
But you didn't make any effort to tell this jury that it didn't matter whether you call it a swipe or a compression until just now. Isn't that right, sir?
Sustained.
You did not tell the jury before cross-examination that it didn't matter whether it was a swipe or a compression, did you, sir?
No, I did not.
Overruled.
Now, Now, the notes that you have before you that were made contemporaneously with the observations on April the 2nd contain no description of little balls, do they?
No, again, I was not the scribe. I made a couple of very simple sketches, and Dr. Lee made all the tests and made all the detailed notes.
And can you tell us, sir, if you have his notes with you?
I believe I do have his notes.
Please look at his notes and tell us whether Dr. Lee has any description in his notes of little balls, lateral swipe, or voids.
No, he only mentioned that he took photographs of them.
He mentions that there are photographs taken of the holes. Isn't that right, sir?
Photographs taken, and he indicates little tiny dots within the cutout area. He states blood-like materials were observed on the inner surface of the other side of this cut, and he's got many little tiny dots, and it says photographs taken, photomicrographs.
And where is the description in his notes of lateral swipe, excuse me?
He doesn't use those words. He says a reddish-brown color he shows it around the cutout area.
There is no note there concerning lateral swipe, isn't that right?
Not on this page, no.
Nor on any page of
No,
his notes,
none
is
that
there?
I recall.
Right. And there's no mention in there of voids either, is there?
There was mention of voids and lateral transfer, but not in his report. We discussed it.
There was verbal discussion on April the 2nd. Is that what you're saying, sir?
There was,
But there is no written record to document that. Isn't that right?
not that I'm aware of.
And the only written record that you made concerning your observations of the socks with respect to the nature of the stain and the little balls is the report dated July 11th. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
So between April the 2nd and July 11th, you made the observations on April the 2nd, but you wrote nothing down concerning your observation of the little balls, the voids, the lateral swipe, until July 11th. Is that right?
That's correct. I wasn't in the country.
So you wrote that report from memory. Is that right?
Yes. And the very, very few lines that I wrote in my description, which are in your possession.
I'm sorry?
The few notes that I made are in your possession. I referred to them.
No, I gave them back to you, didn't I?
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you did. Thank you.
But these notes do not contain, excuse me, sir, a description of evidence, do they?
No, just a sketch.
As a matter of fact, those notes just document your receipt of the evidence and the date and time and what you got. Isn't that right?
Well, it lists the time that was spent examining the two items, 42A and B, according to my notes, and the length of time.
Now, your examination on April the 2nd was done with a very high-intensity light. Is that right?
Yes, high intensity.
And a microscope. Is that right?
Correct.
And you will agree, will you not, that the observation of blood on those socks was a difficult one in view of the dark color of the fabric, sir?
Not when you've got good high-intensity illumination. It would be difficult in this room, yes, but under the conditions that you would use for an examination, it was not difficult. It was straightforward.
And again, though, when you're talking about high-intensity light, can you explain to the jury what you mean by that?
High intensity is more lumens per square centimeter. A pocket light like this can give extremely high intensity right at the end, much more than a 1,000-watt bulb would give here on the ceiling, if the bulb was on the ceiling. So high intensity is the concentration of light in a given area, and it's expressed physically as lumens per square centimeter.
So it would be, if we were to light up this courtroom with that kind of high-intensity light, would we all be wearing sunglasses?
We ought to be. I would be if I could, or I'd close my eyes.
Now, with respect to the distinction between swipe and compression, sir, You did indicate that you observed crime scene photographs, correct?
Yes, I did.
Can I approach?
Thank you, better. All right, Ms. Clark, you may conclude.
Sir, now in characterizing the stain on the outside as a swipe and then changing your testimony in court here to a compression, where
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
you initially characterized the stain as a swipe, is that correct in your report?
In the report, yes.
And then you came in and you testified to say that it was a compression and not a swipe, is that correct?
No, it could be a swipe if the leading and trailing edges are uniform, as they appear to be in the large photographs that I found that Dr. Lee had taken.
So you're saying it could be either one at this point?
Yes, they're the same thing. They're both compression transfers. One has a little more lateral motion than the other.
One has a little more pressure than the other, doesn't it, sir?
Not necessarily, no. You have to have pressure or you won't get any transfer at all.
All right, so compression then could be from touching,
Yes, that's compression.
could be from pressing,
Touching is pressing.
okay? So you don't, what you're saying, sir, is that there's no particular amount of pressure implied. Any pressure will indicate compression, is that right?
There has to be sufficient pressure to transfer a liquid to the surface, and that's very minimal when you have a liquid.
In characterizing it as a compression instead of a swipe, in your direct examination testimony, were you attempting to be more helpful to the defendant?
Sustained, argumentative.
Well, in characterizing the stain as a compression as opposed to a swipe, were you attempting to make it sound more sinister, Mr. MacDonell?
Overruled.
I am a scientist, not an advocate, and I am not changing, modifying, or correcting anything for anyone's benefit except to clarify the matter to the jury. That's my purpose here.
Nevertheless, would you answer the question, sir? Do you think, in your mind, that saying it is a compression makes it sound more sinister than a swipe?
Sustained. Sustained.
You saw photographs of the crime scene, have you not?
Yes, I have.
And let me ask you this, sir. If someone wearing the socks that you saw were to step near to the body of the victim, Nicole Brown Simpson, near enough for the ankle bone to come in contact with her bloody hand, could that cause a compression transfer?
Certainly.
Could it also cause a swipe?
Yes.
If she were to reach a bloody hand out and touch her thumb or finger or hand to the ankle of Mr. Simpson wearing those socks, could that cause a compression or a swipe?
Rephrase the question.
If Nicole Brown Simpson reached out a bloody hand to touch the ankle of the murderer wearing those socks, could that cause a compression or a swipe transfer?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Certainly it could. Anything that has blood on it can either be projected and touch the area that's stained, or this area that's stained could have come in contact with it. It's simple transfer.
Well, for example, I see the way you're sitting, sir. I can't demonstrate this, obviously. But if you were to, can the jury see the way? If you were to move your knee back, sir,
My knee, all this.
to where your ankle bone, the bony protrusion of your ankle, was on top of your knee, could that produce a compression or a swipe?
If one surface was wet, yes.
Now, you noted, sir, that the stain appeared to be in the area of the ankle where there would be the bony protrusion of the ankle, correct?
It appeared to be in that general area. I don't know if the socks were put on, if it would be at the outermost portion or the apex of that circular area, but in that general area, yes. It very well could be at the extreme of the ankle bone.
Okay. And by the extreme, you mean the highest point, the point that protrudes the most?
Correct. On
Now-
either side of the leg. There's one on each side.
Right. And by the way, sir, by looking at the sock, could you tell whether it was a right or left sock, sock A that we're talking about here?
No.
Okay. By the way, and did you happen to ever look at a photograph of the socks in the condition in which they were found on the bedroom floor?
I've seen some pictures of it, yes.
This has been marked so many times, I hate to mark it again, but it's People's 127 already marked. I have one handy, if I may.
127.
Let me ask you, sir, if you've seen this photograph before.
Yes, I have, or one just like it.
Now, you've seen the socks in person, correct?
Yes, I have.
And do they appear to be inside out in this photograph, sir?
and I've got one, but I don't need it. I honestly can't tell. If I had the socks to compare to this, I might be able to, but I don't think so. It's just heavier fabric in the heel and the toe. They certainly, the upper portion seems to be inside out, but to tell whether the whole sock is inside out or not that's lying down, I honestly can't tell you.
Nevertheless, they are lying flat on the, somewhat crumpled, but lying on the floor, correct?
One is more or less folded over. I don't know which side is up or down. It would appear that it is the left side of the one that is spread out the most that is down, but the other one is kind of wadded up.
Okay. And so the jury knows what we're referring to. I'm going to put it on the monitor. I wanted you to see it, sir, because I don't know if your monitor is going to give you as much resolution as you get looking at it up close. Now, when you said that one appeared to be more crumpled up, you were referring to the one up on top, were you not, sir?
Yes, I was.
All right. And now let me ask you a question. If you have, maybe it's just a matter of common sense, but if you have a bony protruding area on an item of clothing, like around the ankle bone, you're wearing a sock, that area is sticking out, that area would be more likely to get blood, assuming blood is in the area of the feet. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, if it was transferred, but spattering or something would be not dependent upon that. But brushing against something, yes, the bone sticks out further.
Right. So the bone area where you found that blood stain would be the place that would be most likely to receive blood from a transfer if you're in the area of blood or a bloody body, correct?
Yes, if that transfer, again, is in right on the ankle bone. I think it would make a difference whether you had it on the right or left foot, though. I think there's a slight difference, but I don't know. It's in that area. I don't know that it's at the peak of the bone, as I said. Of course, the sock is elastic, so you could adjust it so it was or it was not.
Was not. But it was in that general area, you would agree, sir?
Yes, I would.
So if that sock was worn in the commission of a murder and the feet were in the area of a bloody victim, in an area that would swipe the bloody victim, then the area where you found the stain is the area most likely to receive that swipe or compression, correct?
I would say yes.
Now, let me ask you a couple other questions, sir. As a matter of practicality, if someone is sweating and they are wearing socks of this kind of nylon nature, as a practical matter, is it not more difficult to take socks off of a sweaty foot?
Sustain.
Have you ever taken off, have you ever had... Well, I don't know. Mr. MacDonell, have you ever had the experience of wearing nylon socks and exerting yourself to the point where you were sweating?
I used to wear work socks in the oil fields where I grew up and did a lot of manual labor, but I do not honestly remember ever sweating to the point where my socks got wet, and I didn't wear dress socks in the oil fields. I don't sweat when I wear dress socks, and if I can avoid it, I never wear them.
Okay. So you've never had the experience yourself, sir, of sweating in dress socks?
Not that I can remember, no.
Well, can I ask you, sir, if in your experience you have ever had occasion to note whether wet socks or sweaty feet make thin socks like this more difficult to remove? Do you have any experience in that? So I'm trying
He's
to
asking for the foundation at this point. Do you wear these kind of socks?
No.
Men have very particular preferences about their socks. Next question.
All right, if someone has bloody hands, sir, and they attempt to take a sock off by maybe inserting the thumbs inside and the fingers on the outside, if one or more of the fingers are bloody and pressing into the sock, will that cause a compression?
Well, certainly, if you have bloody hands and you touch any fabric, You can transfer blood to it.
Okay. And if you were to touch, if there were wet blood on a piece of fabric that you pressed, that would cause a compression as well, correct?
If the blood was already on the fabric,
Right. And it was wet.
you would squash the blood out of the fabric a little, laterally, yes. It wouldn't cause a transfer unless it was in contact with something else. If you're transferring it to the thumb, yeah, you could transfer it from the fabric to the thumb, if that's what you mean.
What I'm saying, though, sir, is that if there's wet blood on a surface and you press it, will you cause a compression?
If you press it, you cause a compression, yes.
And if wet blood is on a surface and you brush it, will that cause it to appear as a swipe?
Yes, it will. At that point, we would call it a swipe pattern produced by a wiping action.
And can you tell the difference, sir, between whether or not a blood drop has been dripped and swiped later? You know what I mean? Let me make that more clear. Can you tell the difference between whether or not a drop of blood is dripped onto a surface and while still wet, swiped between a blood that is initially swiped on?
If there's enough blood to remain on the surface that doesn't quickly soak right into the fiber of the fabric, you could laterally transfer it and cause a swipe pattern, yes.
In which case, what you would detect would be a swipe pattern as opposed to a drip and a swipe.
I thought I was just answering the drip and swipe. You dripped it. First of all, you're talking about just a drop of blood on a fabric.
Mm-hmm.
If it falls on the fabric and you very quickly create a lateral motion, you should get a swiping of that blood, which will leave blood on the top of the fibers, yes.
And then when you come to analyze it, you would see a swipe and not a drip and a swipe. That was my question.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
You couldn't tell the difference if it was done quickly. That's
Okay.
correct.
And the same would be true, I take it, for a compression. Is that right?
Yes, if the blood is still fluid enough, you can get a lateral motion, and it would look like a swipe.
And likewise, sir, if it was with respect to a stain that you called a compression, if the blood was still fluid and then compressed with a hand or a finger, it would look like a compression to you, would it not?
Well, you just said if it was a compression, so it would look like a compression, yes.
As opposed to a drip and then a subsequent compression.
I think that would be a very difficult thing to differentiate with any degree of accuracy.
Now all right, those little balls on the surface 3, you do not know, those were not typed to determine whether they were blood, correct?
As far as I know, they never have been.
And you don't know, obviously, then,
Objection, Your Honor, that's for sidebar.
assuming they are blood, sir, you don't know whose blood they are, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you indicated that you determined, without ever having seen the actual piece of fabric cut out of the center of the stain, you gave us an estimate that the entire stain would have been 50 to 60 microliters of blood, assuming it was blood.
That's correct.
Okay. And that what you saw on the opposite side in terms of the little flakes and the little balls, you never attempted to quantify, is that right?
Other than to say there was an extremely small volume, no.
It's asked 3 times.
Actually, this is the 4th time. You're right.
All right, so let me ask you a few questions about your background. Do we have to quit exactly at 4?
Yes, we do. We have a doctor's appointment that we have to keep.
Oh, that's right, that's right, that's right. All right, would you like to break now then, Your Honor? And I have one very short area that I intend to complete tomorrow. I won't be able to complete it before 4 o'clock.
Well, once you finish what you can.
Okay. All right, sir, you stated that you were a professor of chemistry at Milton College in Wisconsin for a period of time?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, is that college now closed, sir?
Yes, it is.
When it was open, it was a small liberal arts college, is that right?
That's correct.
About what, 350, 500 students?
Oh, I don't think they ever had 500 while I was there, more like 250 to 300, I would think.
Now let me ask you, at the time that you became a professor, you had an undergraduate degree, correct?
That's correct.
And you became the head of the Department of Chemistry at Milton College, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, when you were head of the department, sir, the entire chemistry department consisted of who?
Me. I was it. I replaced 2 people and offered 12 courses.
Okay. Did you give yourself assignments?
I gave a lot of assignments.
I mean, as head of the department. That was a joke. All right. Did you taught criminalistics at Elmira College in New York?
Yes, I did.
And you left there in 1983, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You said adjunct, but that's a part-time professor, is that right?
Part-time rank of full professor. I believe they have adjunct, associate, adjunct, assistant. It varies from one school to another.
Okay. So what were you teaching at night, sir?
Yes, I was.
Was that a continuing education course you were teaching?
Continuing education courses. I taught quite a few.
Was that 2 to 3 days a week?
It depended. It was usually 2 nights a week, and 2 nights a week every semester, and the summer.
You taught one time at Corning College, is that right?
For quite some time, Corning Community College.
Okay, that's a 2-year college, is that right, sir?
That's correct.
So they don't give any degrees other than AA.
I'm not sure about that. I think they have, since I left, negotiated some form of getting a 4-year degree or a master's program through John Jay College in New York. I'm not sure about that, but basically it's a 2-year school, part of the State University of New York.
Okay, and again, there you were teaching part-time?
Yes.
And was it night school again, continuing education program?
It was days in the beginning in 1960, and then it went through different transitions and ultimately ended up in the evening program, yes.
And was that, again, 2 to 3 nights a week?
It varied depending on the semester, but 2 nights a week was the most I could do.
Now, with respect to either Elmira College or Corning, sir, would you say that either one of them had a formal forensic science program?
They did at the time. They had a criminal justice program at both places. Department of Criminal Justice, I think, was what they called it. They also had a forensic science certificate.
Okay. But when I say a formal forensic science program, sir, I'm talking about something akin to formal program for the giving of a degree in criminalistics or forensic science.
They gave a degree with a major in criminal justice. I don't remember the exact title of it. That's
But-
what it was.
Okay. The criminal justice program, sir, is like the administration of justice, isn't it?
Well, that's part of it, I guess, yes.
It is not primarily a science program, is it?
No, but it satisfies certain science requirements, or at least it did.
It's primarily a coursework, a study of coursework that deals with the criminal justice system, isn't that right?
In general, but my work was primarily in the forensic area of physical evidence and crime scene investigation and microscopy and so on.
Here, sir?
Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the afternoon session. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. Take care of yourselves, stay well. Is there anything we can do in that respect to help you out? Let us know. All right? Get plenty of exercise, fresh air, see the doctor when you need to see the doctor. All right, as far as the jury is concerned, we'll stand in recess until 9 o'clock. After we clear the courtroom, we'll get Mr. Bosco's status report. And Professor, we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock.